Thank you very much, Josie. And just for the record, I of course have to say that NISA is an independent, non-party, non-affiliated organisation, and I will say to you very much what I said to the Liberal Democrat working group on migration policy last week, who asked me to talk, what I would say to Conservatives as well, should they want to hear my opinions. That's just for the record. I'll do two or three things. First, some sort of short-term stuff on what the facts are and what we know about the impact of immigrants in the short term on benefits, public services, jobs, taxes, and so forth. Then some slightly more speculative medium-term stuff on immigration and economics, and then finally how that plays into the general narrative of economic policy. So first, the facts. What do we know? And I think, although one often hears, oh, the government doesn't know anything, we have no idea how many people in the country, how many people came in, how many legal immigrants there are, that's actually not true. The Office of National Statistics does a pretty good job on these things. It's not perfect, there's a lot we don't know, but there is quite a lot we do know. And over the past 10 years, there's been an explosion in the amount of economic research on the impacts of immigration in this country, which I think has been very welcome. So what do we know? We know that the impact of immigration on employment for native workers is small to zero. There have been lots of studies on this, and the evidence is actually pretty conclusive. Immigrants don't take the jobs of native workers. That is a pretty much consensus among labour market economists. Second thing we know is they don't have much impact on wages. There may be some negative impact on wages for lower skilled workers. That's not entirely certain, but it may be the case. But it's actually pretty small. It's a relatively small factor compared to the other things that drive wages for low-skilled workers, in particular on the positive side, the national minimum wage, on the negative side, the impact of technological change and so on. Those are the really big things that matter. Immigration is relatively small. So in terms of the impact on the labour market, the negative impacts are small to zero. We also know quite a lot about immigrants and the benefit system, and the answer is, as I suspect pretty much everybody knows, there's really not much of a problem. Immigrants are much less likely than native Brits to claim working age benefits. That's true both of European immigrants from elsewhere in the EU and also from immigrants from the outside the European Union. They're substantially underrepresented in terms of benefit claimants. We also know a reasonable amount of immigrants and their demands on public services. And this is not rocket science. Most immigrants are of working age and they're mostly healthy. What does the welfare state spend money on in this country? Primarily pensions and healthcare, and what do we spend most of healthcare money on? Healthcare for old people. So simply by virtue of demographics, immigrants place significantly less burden on public services than your average Brit. That's not a comment on whether immigrants are good people or not. It's just a statement of obvious demographics. And so the net impact of immigration on taxes and public services is pretty obvious. Again, as a consequence, immigrants make a significant net fiscal contribution. We have that in detail for European Union immigrants, but it's also true of non-European Union immigrants on average. So the bottom line is, without immigration, either taxes would have to be higher or we'd have to cut public services even more than we're doing already. So we know that as a matter of a pretty well-established fact. And I don't think any economist would seriously argue with that. Now those are short-term impacts. They don't tell you that much about what the medium to long-term impact of immigration is, where it's necessary to be quite a bit more speculative. There are impacts of immigration on the long-term financing of the welfare state and the pension system. Again, those are probably broadly positive, although we shouldn't overstate it. I do not think it is the case, as some people say, we need immigrants to pay our pensions. Immigrants will help pay our pensions, and they make the long-term fiscal situation somewhat more sustainable than it would otherwise be. But it's actually not a big deal. Essentially, we have to sort out our long-run fiscal problems for ourselves, one way or the other. But that doesn't mean to say that the long-run impact of immigration on the economy is small. It almost certainly isn't. And here, you know, maybe this is slightly countercultural for this audience, but I do think that, you know, my attitude to immigration is that of a liberal, and I say liberal, one is a liberal Democrat. Liberal is a small L. and liberal in an economic sense. I tend to believe, actually, that markets, for most things, markets do a pretty good job of allocating resources. And if you believe that, and you believe it about things like trade, then you have to believe it about things like immigration. It's simply inconsistent to think that free trade, as every major party in this country claims to do, that free trade is an important ingredient in Britain's prosperity, and that trading, that growing our exports will be an important part of Britain's growth story over the next 20 years. It's very hard to square that view with the belief that we can be successful if we become steadily more close to immigration. There are upsides and downsides of globalization, and I wouldn't want to minimize the latter. But on the whole, I do actually believe that the Prime Minister is right when he says that if we want to be successful and prosperous, if we want to win the global race, in that rather corny phrase, that Britain needs to be open for business. But it is simply absurd to suggest that Britain can be open to business and closed for immigration. If we want to be successful globally, if we want to compete, if we want to pay our way in the world, then being open towards the benefits of immigration, the skills from abroad, and I don't just mean about filling short-term skills gaps, I mean the interchange of ideas, the promotion of healthy competition, the injection of entrepreneurialism, the benefits you get from diversity, and I mean diversity in the widest sense, by having people coming in and leading the country. All of those are part of Britain's long-term economic prosperity, and you just cannot get those benefits without having a relatively liberal immigration system. And unfortunately, over the last few years, we've gone in the wrong direction there. Finally, well, what does that mean for politics, small p politics? And as I say, it's not my place to tell any particular party what to do. But I think what I would say is that all three party leaders, even when, as today, the policy proposals they're making are actually pretty much fiddling around the edges, aiming for headlines. That was certainly true of the Queen's speech and what the Prime Minister said. It was certainly true of what Nick Clegg said. I think what Ian Miliband said actually had rather more content and more sensible content to do it around some things about labour market regulation and enforcement of the national minimum wage. But still, what none of them did was to make that sort of positive case and say, actually, if we want to be a prosperous country, if we want to pay our way in the world, then we have to be relatively open. That's part of what makes Britain, that's part of what's underlaid Britain's economic success over the past 150 years. It's parts of what will make it successful over the next 20 years. Go out there and tell people that and explain that actually some immigrants are good, some immigrants are bad, some consequences of immigration are, in the short term, are good. Mostly they're good, but sometimes they're not so good. But the underlying approach has to be one of openness if we want to be successful, and trying to get that narrative across and explain it to the British people seems, as we have successfully done about free trade, I think, seems to me a really important challenge for all the major political parties. I'll stop there.
Thank you.